2. Check, check. You guys hear me?
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Thursday, October 28th, 2021 Walnut Creek Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Secretary, can you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Commissioner Lezak?
Here.
Commissioner Strongman?
Here for my first planning commission meeting in person.
Oh,
And the thing is not working.
try pushing it really hard. Oh. Here comes technical help.
Here for my first planning commission meeting.
Ah, there we go. First planning commission meeting in person.
In person. In person.
Commissioner Ward?
Here.
Chair Koselleck?
Here.
And Commissioners Pickett, Anderson, and Vice Chair Reiser are absent tonight. But we do have a quorum with 4.
Thank you. The first order of business is the consent calendar, but I don't believe we have anything on the consent calendar this evening.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
So we will move on to public communications. Anyone wishing to speak on an item that is not on tonight's agenda may approach the podium. Anybody who is joining us with Zoom, you can use the raised hand feature or *9, and we will bring you into the meeting. Are there anybody in the audience that would like to speak?
And Mr. Chair, we have no members of the public attending via Zoom.
Okay, great. We will close public communications and move on to public hearings. And the first public hearing this evening, and probably the only public hearing this evening, is the Bay Rock Mixed-Use Community Benefits Agreement, application number PA 21-004. And it looks like Chip has a short, sweet presentation.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, for members of the public, well, actually, you know what, nobody's on Zoom. I don't have to give this part of the spiel about raising your hand, so never mind.
All right.
I apologize, Mr. Griffin.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Thank you, Chair Koselleck. My name's Chip Griffin, and the Commission. My name's Chip Griffin. I'm a senior planner here with the Planning Division in Walnut Creek, and I'm here tonight to present pre-application project PA 21004 for Bay Rock Communities Community Benefits Project. Little housekeeping here. The applicant, Stuart Grendel, is here tonight. He will not have a presentation. He may have a few words to say, and he'll be here to answer questions. Let's see. Let me make that work. Okay, so we're here tonight for for our first community benefits application. This does not include a development project. It just the community development community benefit component of a future project. Now let's see if I can command this thing. So here's our project site. We've got Ignacio Valley Road running west to east there. We've got North Broadway here and Arroyo. It's these 3 parcels that will be the future project site. They're it's about 1.56 acres. The site is located within the North Downtown Specific Plan area. It's zoned to MUC. It has a base density of 1 unit per 875 square feet. I think that equals out to 50 units per acre. Has a building height of 50 feet. At the time for development, it'll likely be ground floor commercial with multifamily residential above, and there are easements that run through these parcels. Of course, those parcels would be merged. I've highlighted the easement. It's 100 feet across, and then there's an easement within the easement, which are gasoline lines, is what they're called. And of course, we got our site again. We've got the 3 existing properties. This is the current DMV, or the recently closed DMV. Here is that PG&E tower. And then over to the north of it is the gas station. Community benefits, what is it? Community benefits are described in both the specific plans, West Downtown and North Downtown. Those aren't the only specific plans we have, but those are the 2 that community benefits is part of. Its purpose to just give developers an opportunity to secure some extra development potential in exchange for providing community benefits. What it ultimately does, though, is establishes the building envelope for a future project. So in this case, what we're looking at for public improvements would be, here again is the project site inlaid with a conceptual site plan. You can see the portions of North Broadway here between Arroyo intersection and right at the bottom of the YVR intersection, and then a portion of Arroyo here, both sides, a portion of Arroyo here, both sides, and it goes a little bit east of the site. Also, you can see here's a private, and those are the publicly, those would be the publicly owned community benefits. This is the privately owned community benefit, and if I can get this thing to react, well, we'll just take a look at the next slide. It's the area in red. It's approximately 15,300 feet. It needs to be at least 20% of the net site area, and that will be the private public open space, privately owned, publicly accessible open space. So, points. What are they? Points are gained through purchasing the increments, and the increments include all three of these development regulations: height, density, and FAR. In this case, the applicant is only looking to increase the density and the FAR. There's no opportunity to increase the height on this site through community benefits. Each increment will provide 100 or take off 120, reduce the net area, the area needed for a unit by 125 square feet, and increase the FAR by 0.5. Now they need two. They're looking at two of these, so they would double those increments. How do you get the points? Well, it's a large project. That means it's over 40,000 square feet, and for 40,000 square feet, you need 3 points. For each additional 20,000 feet of which they have one of those increments, I shouldn't use the word increment because one of those bonus areas, you would get 1 point. So that's 4 points. They want two, right? They want 2 increments, so they need 8 points. So we go back up to here. They would need the 8. Well, I had it earlier, but so yes, they would need. They're looking to gain 8 points. What are they going to do with these 8 points? They are going to provide privately owned physical improvements and publicly owned physical improvements. From as far as the public open space goes, these are taken from a menu of sorts from the specific North Downtown Specific Plan of potential community benefits to choose from. And I reduced that table down to 3 because there's probably, I don't know, 15, 20 on there. But just to the one that they're interested in providing, and that's that public open space. So they get 1 point for a less than 2 acre site, which it is, 1.56. So 10% of the area is a 1 point benefit. Now they need 2, so they're going to provide 20%. And there's our circle. As far as the publicly owned physical improvements, they are going to provide streetscape maintenance improvements, and intersection improvements. They'll provide approximately 550 linear feet of streetscape. The streetscape that's shown in concept in a section, and I believe you have that in your staff report from the North Downtown Specific Plan. It'll reduce a drive lane at a middle lane and class 4 bike lanes. Andy, class 4 bike lanes?
Class 4 cycle tracks.
Yeah. Throughout the up and down Broadway. Also, they're going to improve the intersection at Arroyo and North Broadway. And that'll be for a total of 4 points. There we go. So when you add them all up, you get 2 points for the open space, 4 points for the street improvements, and 2 points for the intersection improvements, totaling 8 points. That's what they needed for the 2 increments. Here is an illustrative site plan that was provided, just kind of points out again from a different look on where these public benefit improvements will go. Just a slide to throw in a coordinating effort. This project coordinates and works with the the North Broadway Road Diet Plan. The developer of the project right there, 699 YVR, it's a 100% affordable project that's going to be constructed there in the next year or so. They have applied for, and we don't know the result yet, but for some grant money to do some, which will include road improvements. So as you can see in this diagram, the orange represents the road diet program. The purple, let's see, represents the grant, what the grant money will provide improvements for, and the green is the community benefits from this project. So it's a coordinated effort between a couple of projects, state grant money, and our local developers. With that, I would move to recommend to adopt a proposed resolution approving the community benefit agreement, or the CBA, for a future mixed-use development at 1910 North Broadway. Any questions of staff?
Thank you, Chip. Are there, Commissioner Lezak?
Thank you, Mr. Griffin, for your nice presentation, nice and brief. Couple of questions about things that the project might normally be responsible for providing. So I notice here that some of the streetscape improvements are indicated to be across the street from. Would it be fair to say that the project is already responsible for a portion of street improvements adjacent to the project itself?
The project would be typically required to do street improvements along the frontage of the site for half street, at maximum, not the whole street.
So the community benefit then is the other half of the street, and we're not counting the portion of the project that the project would already be doing as a community benefit.
Correct. Yeah, so the portions of Arroyo that are not on the frontage, and the portions of Broadway that are not on the frontage and the intersection.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And then a kind of similar related question. The open space, and the applicant probably can speak to this a little bit better. It doesn't appear that in the benefits program and in the way we wrote this in the specific plan that there's any qualitative description of what might be there. I note that in this case, this is an open space area that's essentially undevelopable for the most part because of the way the PG&E power lines run through there. And then you have a gas line that runs through there, and then based on the conceptual site plan that you're showing, there needs to be, in order to build those buildings, a fire truck turnaround, all of which are very creatively placed in that same area. And then that same area is then dedicated as public open space, so it gets the triple whammy of having community benefit. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is, since the developer was already going to leave this as open space, and theoretically it would be, if they have downstairs retail, at some portion of the day, that space would be open to the public. It might not be a publicly dedicated open space. So what is the additional above and beyond community benefit that takes a space of that nature to the point of being a 2-point community benefit open space dedication?
I see your point. But it would work similar to, and Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would work similar to well, I shouldn't say a city park, because that would be a publicly owned facility. But this has the same type of access to the public as say a park would. You don't have to live there. I guess I could say where you might be loitering in some cases, you wouldn't necessarily be loitering here.
So is that at a particular time of day? I mean, I'm trying to understand,
No,
if there's retail open during a certain time of day, it would be considered a publicly open space because of the retail hours. presumably after hours when the retail is closed, then if you were in that space, you'd be loitering if you weren't one of the residents, right?
Correct, and I made the mistake of not taking a closer look at the agreement before I came down here, but there are specific hours that it is a publicly open space, and it's listed in the agreement in your staff report. I think it's 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
And
So any time after that, then it's no longer a publicly open space.
So how did you envision that happens? Is it through some kind of an easement that it's dedicated in that way? And again, maybe the applicant has some follow-up answers to this, but how is that, perfected in terms of the map or the dedication itself?
And that's it. It will be in a map, say a subdivision or parcel map.
So it would be an easement with some separate easement language that would define those hours of operation? I mean, most easements on the face of the map, public access easement, PAE, for example, would just say PAE, and it would be publicly accessible all the time. So this would be, slightly different than that?
I don't know that we've gotten as far as looking at if those limitations would be on the map. My inclination is that it wouldn't be, because they're in the agreement.
I guess, again, I don't mean to beat this up, because again, this is a little bit of nuance, mostly about this being the first community benefit agreement as opposed to the project itself. And that is, that it seems to me that this is an area that was already gonna be open space. It was already gonna be publicly accessible from some hours, like 9 to 5 or something like that. So they get 2 extra points by being open publicly available, a couple hours in the morning and a few hours after that. And as far as I can tell, it doesn't actually create it's not a walking corridor, there's no connectivity to a trail, there's no connectivity to the adjacent parcels. It's really a landlocked, PG&E gas easement with a little bit of pavers and a couple of benches that gets 2 community benefit points.
If I may, Commissioner Lezak, I'd like to address 2 items. One with regard to the question of the easement or the control of access. Attachment 1B to the staff report is the actual official community benefit agreement, at least in draft form. It's essentially a contract that would be entered into between the property owner and the city, and it includes a number of, as drafted here, a number of conditions, and one of which does address the issue of public access to the site and hours of operation. With regard to the nature of the open space itself, you definitely raise a very valid point about, the space within the easement, at least, is not buildable. You're not going to build, the developer wouldn't be able to put their structures there. However, they would be able to put surface parking there, and that would probably be, under normal circumstances, I would expect at least that a good portion of that area would be used as surface parking rather than the more expensive structured parking, which is being proposed for this development. And so I don't know if I would go quite so far as to say that it would have been open space anyway, but you're definitely correct that it would not be a building. And as far as the quality of the space, it's being proposed as more of kind of a passive recreation space, something that would most likely, it wouldn't be a regional draw like Heather Farm Park, but something more for local residents admittedly of this site, but also neighboring properties, particularly as more housing development occurs in the area. Of course, you're familiar with the large project across the street from the Target, Target on North Main that's under construction. And we expect actually a considerable amount of mixed use and multifamily development in the coming years in this area. And so this would serve the future residents of the area. Similar actually to, this reminds me, I actually have to say from my childhood, in boring San Jose. In my neighborhood, we had some high tension power lines going through, and there was actually, I think it was publicly owned in that case, but there was passive recreation, landscaping, trails where I used to ride my bike, a little bit of grass underneath the power lines that went through the neighborhood. And so this would be similar to that, but of course in a less suburban orientation than what I grew up with. But that would be the general intent of what was anticipated for this particular community benefit.
Okay, well, and I appreciate that in my research, I remember having these discussions about how to create the community benefit program, working on the specific plan. And I know at that time, we decided that it was better to go with quantitative items rather than make this some kind of a beauty contest of qualitative nature. And here I am spinning this thing back around the other way. If I'm reading this correctly, this meets the 20% or 10% times 2 quantitative requirement. So despite my other comments, it really still meets the qualification for the 2 points. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Strongman?
Yes, thanks for the presentation. And does the street improvements include landscaping and street furniture per the North Downtown Specific Area Plan?
I don't know that includes street trees. It does? No.
Yes,
Okay.
it does.
Okay, thank you. And there's a proposed but not necessarily built signal at Arroyo on Broadway. Assuming it's not built now, is the developer on the hook, say 20 years from now, when it's finally deemed necessary to have the signal?
Well, that's a good question. It was originally a part of this package, this community benefits package, but it was, a signalized intersection wasn't warranted as shown. So that was taken off the table, so to speak. If the intersection becomes, if signalization of that intersection becomes a requirement of the project, then I believe that would become part of the project.
But not necessarily that the project is built and 15 years down the road, traffic, Walnut Creek traffic determines it needs a signal. They are not.
Probably not.
Okay. And one last question. If the developer decides to forego the improved FAR and other enrichments, can they just go build something and not do any of this?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
They would be responsible for the appropriate improvements along their immediate frontages for the
But not
half
the
width of
rest
their
of-
street, but nothing beyond that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ward, any questions?
So the road improvements on the other side of the street seem pretty considerable and, exactly what this program was designed to do. But I'm interested in the interplay with the other projects that are going on. And it appeared that there is a provision in this program that if we needed to swap out improvements at some point because they were already done by another project, that would be possible. Is that correct?
Well, I think for the projects not for Bayrock, I believe that's true. I don't I don't know that that's true for this community benefits.
So that's actually something that came up in discussion with the city council when we were creating the community benefits program as a whole. And so there is language in there, particularly around time extensions for community benefit agreements, allowing the city to essentially change their mind, if you will, if a time extension is requested. And one of the situations where that could be a factor is if it turns out that, somebody else is going to build the improvement. In this case, it's a relatively, we know exactly where it's going to be. The examples, or perhaps the most common example that was raised by the city council, were things like parklets or pocket parks. And in fact, it was to prevent an overproliferation of any one particular community benefit type was one of the key reasons why the city council still wanted these points-based applications to come to the planning commission for a semi-discretionary review, is to make sure what's being proposed, they're not coming in with the 45th and the 46th pocket park, for example.
Okay, so it's not, we have a degree of certainty as to the type of improvement that's going to be done in exchange for the benefit points in this case. And it's not like, oh, we changed our mind and that other guy's going to do it and now you have to do this other thing. That's not really how this works in that case.
Oh, no, if the commission approves this community benefits agreement, this is what's approved, and the applicant doesn't then have the ability to just work with staff and change it administratively to something else. We would actually have to come back to the planning commission for a new CBA if they wanted to propose a different community benefit instead.
Okay, great, thank you. And then it seems to me that the benefit for the public park area, or whatever we're calling it, isn't just making it, they have a in perpetuity responsibility to maintain it as well. So that's
Correct.
really one of the,
Correct.
it's taking that responsibility off the city's plate and keeping it with the
Correct.
private developer. Okay. And it appears the hours are 6 AM to 10 PM for that park, so that's pretty considerable. It's a big increase, I would think. And I assume that appropriate lighting would be required for that space so that it would be safe and all the like, but,
Yes, that was
Yeah.
reviewed by planning, engineering, and PD for the hours, and this, any improvement there will be subject to design review approval, and
of course, yeah.
lighting is a big component of design review.
It really is, because it's just not safe or usable if it's not properly lit, so it makes a big difference. That's all I have, thank you.
Chip, the street exhibit looked a little different than what was in the North Downtown Specific Plan. And our secretary mentioned a cycle track. Can you explain to me what the concept is for this project?
I believe in your staff report, I don't have it in here, but you've got the street section from North Downtown.
Yes.
Yeah,
And this-
I should preface this by saying that these are conceptual designs at this point.
Understood.
Yeah, so let me see if I can, you wanted to take a look
Yeah,
at this?
and I can add to that, yeah, I think the key word with regards to, frankly, both specific plans is conceptual. And, you know, we did, of course, with both plans, work very closely with traffic engineering and public works, regular engineering, in coming up with those preliminary plans, but they really are just conceptual. And in the case of this one, if I remember correctly, the specific plan calls for Class 2 bike lanes, maybe buffered bike lanes. However, I'll say the technology in bike infrastructure has progressed in a relatively short amount of time, and the city traffic engineer was much more interested in doing cycle tracks, and so we accommodated that in kind of a slightly modifying the designs, or filling in from the conceptual drawings that are in the specific plan. And I will note that in this case, the developer, in drawing their plans, our engineering staff actually provided them with the baseline, the start of the drawings, and they kind of took them from there. So they were actually working directly with public works staff in coming up with these, as well as planning, of course.
So will there be on-street parking in this segment?
Yes.
Yeah,
So then we will have parking, the way the concept is, rough as it is, parking, then a bike path, cycle track, separated from the sidewalk, correct?
Correct.
Not a combination.
not a combination.
Bike path, sidewalk. Okay. As far as the signal goes, if we're creating all these sidewalk connections, pathways, bike lanes, why wouldn't we put a signal in?
It's my understanding that the warrants,
Well, the traffic signal warrants for volumes, et cetera, probably don't require a signal here at this time, but that doesn't mean we couldn't put one in for pedestrian crossings, et cetera. So is the only reason that it was excluded because it didn't meet the traffic warrant criteria, to the best of your knowledge?
yeah, to my knowledge it is, but if that proves different when traffic studies come in for the project, which would be more than likely a couple different ways. We'd probably have the traditional LOS study and a VMT study, and there would be the LOS study that would show it. And if the traffic engineers determine that it requires a signal, then it would become a condition of approval.
Okay.
I hate to keep jumping in, but I actually want to strengthen what Chip is saying. As, from a planning standpoint, I was actually pushing Smadar, our traffic engineer, like, "Hey, let's get a traffic signal," and she was pushing back saying, no, it's really not needed. And in terms of, at some point, if you put a signal where you don't need it, I mean, obviously there's maintenance expenses and all that, but it can have an impact on regular traffic flow, but more importantly, do want to note that 2 travel lanes are being removed from Broadway, or North Broadway, I should say. So the actual overall design of the street is being slowed down, and the crossing distance at the intersections is being greatly reduced, both through reduced number of lanes and through bulb outs. And so it was, in addition to just the simple quantitative traffic warrant evaluation, there was also a qualitative evaluation by the city's traffic engineer, who specifically pushed back on having a traffic signal there. But as Chip said, though, if it, in the final analysis, if it comes out that there really is a need, the developer would be, for lack of a better term, on the hook for that, as with any other project.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, are there any restrictions in the PG&E easement as to what is allowed under their transmission lines?
Oh, sure. They don't allow structures, one, and trees. They don't allow larger, I think you can do small ornamental trees, that type of thing. I'm not sure of any other limitations, but except for structures and tree roots.
So you're not, so were you able to get a copy of the easement for that? I'm curious as to if the easement says it can't be used for a parking lot, or if it's silent on that. Yes, normally it says no buildings, no structures, no trees. I was just wondering if it had any other restrictions or conditions.
None that I know of. The applicant might be able to
Okay,
speak to that as well.
great. Okay, that was all my questions. Chip, thanks. Any other questions from staff? Okay, we will open up the public hearing then, and we will let the applicant say a few words if he wishes.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Planning Commission, and staff. I'm Stuart Grendel with Bayrock Multifamily. This is our 3rd land development in Walnut Creek in the last 3 years. We bought this property about 3 years ago, knowing that the North Downtown Specific Plan was getting teed up for its evolution and approval. We considered ourselves a stakeholder. We participated in all the charrettes and the stakeholder meetings surrounding this property. So this is a lot of work went into all of this. We worked very closely with your engineering staff on these improvements and these frontage improvements to make sure we got it right. And again, they are conceptual. A lot of responses were detailed, knowing that that gets picked up during design review. And all these things that you brought up tonight and your questions were also discussed at the staff level over several months. The PG&E easement has a major gas line going through it. It would, if we were going to build a project today under design review and the prescriptive zoning, you're right, we don't have to do anything. It would just remain a sea of asphalt. And we saw this as a real opportunity to proceed with an accessible, functional, open space. Originally, in the North Downtown Specific Plan, charrettes and stakeholder meetings, I actually proposed a continuous trail system underneath the entire power line and try to tie all this together, kind of what you said, all the way, Mr. Lezak, all the way through town. And I don't know why, but it seemed like a good thing. Developers usually don't say that, but it was dismissed. So we really saw this as an opportunity for accessible open space. So the PG&E thing, you can imagine trying to vet this thing with PG&E land during the pandemic. Talk about a black hole. And PG&E is always a black hole. I hope they're listening tonight. But we did get a lot of their attention, and they have a set of standards that basically you can't put a tree higher that's going to grow to its peak at 15 feet. And you can't have any permanent structures in there that are vertical above a man height that they can't readily take down. And if you do a permanent structure, they don't have a purview because it's an easement. So if I went in there and built a couple tiny houses or interim sheds or something, and they came in and tried to work on the gas line, they could just destroy it, and I'm out of luck. And that's basically what the easement says. And we don't get a written document. We get emails from them on that. So, but it's quite extensive on their policy statements, and they took their sweet time reviewing it and a couple intelligent people there got back to us as well. We also vetted, at staff's urging, the Contra Costa County Fire EVA, and went through the code analysis on all of that, knowing this is not design review. And you all know at design review, that gets pretty extensive and signed off prior to staff's presentation on design review. And we went through that because the EVA cannot be considered part of the open space, as staff pointed out. And we also had, originally, we had parking spaces at the rear of that accessible open space, and the optics looked like it was, the EVA was being used as a direct vehicle access to those accessible public spaces, and we didn't want to do that. So Jet Landscaping has proposed a conceptual plan that's going to be quite active, has low-lying shrubs, it's going to have trees, it's going to have movable benches in there, and it's going to be quite inviting. And of course, we have, you all have a lot of units teed up around here, so we think it's going to be a great asset to the neighborhood. Yeah, CC Fire spent several days looking at that, so we were very happy to get their sign off on that as well. On the public improvements, vetted with engineering, Arroyo, we had different options. On the Arroyo improvements, that's the low point of the site, so there's going to be some stormwater treatment area in that's going to benefit this whole area. As you probably can remember, going through the North Downtown Specific Plan, sort of the water flow heads to the creek, and it kind of heads generally, I'm speaking generally, down Arroyo. So this is a really good opportunity to take both sides of the Arroyo, equal to our frontage, it's about 150 feet, and create a storm retention system in that area. And then, of course, the bike lane that Andy described. And Andy just did, as you know, did a ton of work on this plan, so it was really refreshing having him guide all of us, including engineering, on what was realistic for creating points here. And they urged us, staff urged us, originally we weren't going to do this, but urged us to go all the way to YVR, because we're sort of the last really outpost. Who knows when the gas station gets developed? So I commend staff for that. That's an easy give and a good one. And everyone was very fair. And then finally, I just have to state on the record that the project, under the CBA is a draft agreement. It's got the specific conditions of approval in there that we have to abide by. Again, we see this as a real opportunity, so we're bound to maintain it. We have posted hours. We have to clean it up. It will be into perpetuity. It's basically a perpetual easement into perpetuity for you folks and the neighborhood. The project meets all the applicable objective code requirements and standards, including under the Community Benefits Ordinance, and therefore qualifies as a housing development project, subject to mandatory approval per the state's Housing Accountability Act. Now, I'm saying that on the record to your city attorney because we're the guinea pig, right? This is the first project to come through. It's kind of new, and I'm not trying to catch you off guard, but we clearly believe this is under HAA. And another reason why we took the quantitative, not qualitative, approach on the point system, because it just gets into too gray of area. And you can imagine when we go through design review, the fun we're all going to have on, say, the open space. And then finally, on the traffic study is mandated. We have to do a traffic study as part of our application at design review and prior to building permit, and that will warrant anything out in the street calming configuration at Arroyo and Broadway. So we're on the hook if for some reason traffic counts increase over the course of the next 18 months. And then just finally, I would like to request if there's, and I don't know what you've done most recently, if there's a possibility to condition an automatic extension just because of where we're at right now in the cost environment. The costs that Chip had included in his staff report are probably up about another 20%. And I don't need to explain why that's happened. But we'd like to say that if we're in the process, we have a 2-year entitlement here, could we get an automatic 1-year extension if we're in the process of taking it to the next level entitlements, which would be design review? And I'm happy to answer any other questions for you.
Great. Are there, Commissioner Lezak?
Have you submitted an application for a project at this point, or just an application for a benefit agreement?
Now, we submitted a PRT application.
So that's
it was
a
just scoped to- it was just scoped to
preliminary scope.
Yes.
So then, And where I'm going with this is I'm trying to understand, given the state law, there was some discussion in the staff report about that this hearing would not count toward the 5 hearing limit under SB 30. And trying to understand, in my world, the state was trying to indicate to cities that design review you over and over and over again, not to mention any cities, but
Right.
that there's, the hearings like this should count. But they don't count if you haven't actually submitted a formal application. And so I'm just trying to understand, was it your understanding and are you comfortable with the fact that this doesn't count toward that?
I am comfortable with that. And that's I'm glad you brought that up because that will be on the record. I don't believe this should count towards the meeting total requirement under HAA. But we do state on the record that the ordinance is covered by the HAA.
Okay, so that's, like, I guess, part
We're
of why.
accepting, accepting, if we can do that, we're accepting the number of hearings.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to take the nuanced approach to the comment that you made.
Yeah.
And understand exactly.
It's a
you
good
know,
one.
Yeah, actually how you feel about that. And,
Yeah.
you know, it seems to me, unless you've made a formal project application, that you're not subject to all of those other things anyway. But that's neither here nor there. What's important tonight, I think, is that, you know, we're having the opportunity to talk about community benefits with somebody who was part of that process going in, and this is our first opportunity to do this, because I think what we were hoping when we did the specific plan is that we would find an opportunity to do more, bigger, better than what we could do in the specific plan, and the only way to do that is through this program.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, that's all I had. I just wanted to try to understand your comments there. Thank you.
Commissioner Lezak, I guess from our office's perspective, I do want to state for the record that, you know, it is the city's position that, you know, this is not an SB 30, SB 330 Housing Accountability Act hearing, and it would not count. So I wasn't sure if you were sort of soliciting agreement to that, but regardless of the applicant's position, it is the city's position that this is a pre-application and we do not yet have a development application. We are not yet under the purview of the Housing Accountability Act.
Okay, thank you. No, I think both sides are saying something similar.
Yes. I believe we are.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will open it up to public comments at this point. Is there, step on up.
Come on, come on. Hi there, Jan Warren, resident of Walnut Creek, and I got this notice of the meeting tonight in my email. I'm always looking at those, well, what's going on? And the first thing I saw about this project was the street is super wide, and I guess that's why they consider it 4 lanes, because it's used as 2 lanes. And they're proposing to put in a middle lane, and my first thought was, wow, what a great opportunity to put in wider, better movement on bike lanes instead of this sidewalk, car parking, bike lane, narrow 8-foot danger that we have everywhere with and our goal to connect. I mean, we had the Brio over here, and as I vaguely recall, the plan was to have passageway behind there, kind of over towards whatever is going to happen with Toyota, and then, you know, somehow you get over there to the BART. But we have a great need with all the construction going on. That building across from Target is just huge. And it's dangerous to walk, it's dangerous to bike, and there isn't much need for the parking on this section. And I just see it as an opportunity, unlike Main Street, feeds down Arroyo right into the Civic Park, up into the Iron Trail. I love the gentleman's comment on trail. I don't know why people wouldn't like that. But I'm just here to find out what's going on and what the possibility might be to consider something different. We've gone through the parklets and the bulb outs and all that sort of thing, and
we have an opportunity to look at things differently. I know Oakland's done some safe streets and just different ways of looking at possibilities. So I would encourage that. It's early in the process, and always glad to have more housing in Walnut Creek. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, do we have anybody online wishing to?
No, we still have no members of the public attending via Zoom.
Okay, great. We will bring it back to the applicant to see if he would like to respond to anything he's heard or make any additional comments, your choice. No other comments, thank you. Okay, great, thank you. We will then close the public hearing and bring it back to the commissioners for any comments they would like to make or a motion. Commissioner Lezak?
I'll go ahead and motion to approve the Walnut Creek Planning Commission resolution for Community Benefit Agreement PA 21-004 Bayrock Mixed Use.
I will second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Commission Secretary, you're on.
Commissioner Lezak,
Yes.
Commissioner Strongman,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Chair Kraselic.
Yes,
Passes unanimously.
thank you. Congratulations, good luck with your project. I'm sure we'll see you again. Okay, moving on, next item is commission considerations. This evening, we are going to consider a calendar. Mr. Secretary?
Yes, included in your packet is a very colorful commission and council calendar in draft form for the year 2022. And with regard, real frankly, to all these meetings, we've tried our best to avoid all the various holidays, legal, major, and otherwise, in accommodating everybody, and basically looking to see if the commission has any concerns over any of the proposed hearing dates for the Planning Commission for this coming year.
Are there any concerns? My only concern is you keep using the same colors and you ought to change it up once in a while.
I will let the clerk know.
All right.
I guess, well, I have a question. On November 17th, it looks like transportation and planning are meeting at the same time, so do we get the council chambers, or?
That's actually the same thing is happening this year, which is why I've tentatively canceled the upcoming Planning Commission meeting, because we don't have anything on the agenda. But
I thought that was a joint session.
yeah, it's much like this year where things are being bumped around because, well, actually, next year it's because of Thanksgiving. This year it's because of Veterans Day, Veterans Day. But that is actually something that I don't really like. Fortunate it happened to work out this year, and that it looks like we're not going to have anything for this commission in 2 weeks, or whenever it is, second meeting in November. But I don't know what would happen next year, so actually I'll follow up with the city clerk on that.
Great. We get priority for down here.
Well, I am at the moment secretarying both of those commissions, so I will not take a position.
Commissioner Ward called shotgun. I think she went.
Well, and 3 of you are formerly from the Transportation Commission, so for shame.
Okay, next item is commission member and staff reports or announcements. I'll make just a quick statement that we've been talking about narrowing that street for 12, 15 years or so. It's about time, so let's make it happen, sir. Anything from any of the commissioners? Nope. Anything from staff? Oh, Commissioner Strongman.
That we would sure like to have our parking places back when we have commission meetings.
Yes, I will follow up again with the police department to make sure that the rules in the City Hall parking lot are properly enforced to ensure accessibility to our commissioners and our city council members during city meetings. Thank you.
You can let the police chief know that Commissioner Pickett has volunteered to serve as parking attendant in the evenings and issue citations as appropriate.
Just so that everyone at the police department knows, I will gladly defer my parking space for a police officer anytime.
All right, with that, we will consider the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.